Good Wednesday afternoon. Thanks for joining us on Kare 11 News Now. I'm Chris Arabsky. New this afternoon, a major decision by the Minnesota Supreme Court. The court ruling hours ago that USA Powerlifting discriminated against powerlifter J.C. Cooper by denying her entry into women's competitions for USA Powerlifting. Justices ruling that USA Powerlifting's policy that barred J.C. Cooper from competing is against the Minnesota Human Rights Act. But the High Court sent their ruling back to a lower court to decide whether USA Powerlifting has a, quote, legitimate business purpose for excluding her. During oral arguments, Cooper's attorney said USA Powerlifting's policy discriminated against all transgender women. USA Powerlifting's attorney argued that female transgender powerlifters have a significant advantage in the sport. New today, arson charges for a man police say firebombed Fletcher's ice cream shop in northeast Minneapolis twice in 24 hours. Court documents say Formosa Ahmed Omar was seen on surveillance video lighting a Molotov cocktail and throwing it at the building both times. Omar was arrested a short time later after being pulled over. Officers say there was a red gas container in the front passenger seat. Fletcher's front window was damaged and a few chairs started on fire, but no one was hurt. Right now, police are still searching for the motive. New today, Minneapolis teachers will vote to go on strike. That voting will start tomorrow and last through the 27th. That's after the Minneapolis Federation of Teachers and the district failed to reach an agreement on a new contract, even after months of back and forth and a final hours-long push overnight to get a deal done. The teachers union says families within MPS have called on the district to invest in smaller class sizes and better student support. The district says their last offer met a lot of the union's priorities. If the teachers union votes to strike, they need to let the state know 10 days in advance. As Minneapolis takes a closer look at how its police department handled several recent major cases, the city auditor says the department isn't cooperating. In a meeting this week, he said officers and department leaders have delayed and even resisted interviews. Raya Katene is here with the details.
Abene, here.
All 7 members of the Minneapolis Audit Committee were present at Monday's meeting.
Welcome to the regular meeting.
But notably missing were Minneapolis police leaders who, according to the agenda, were supposed to present updates on audits into their fleet management and off-duty work.
And the frustration here is our community safety auditors reached out to them more than a dozen times.
City Auditor Robert Timmerman says his team is being met with, quote, great resistance as they investigate MPD's response into what the city describes as high-impact public safety cases. The alleged shooting of Davis Maturi by his neighbor after Maturi says he told police multiple times he was threatened, and the death of Allison Lucier, who last year was found dead in her Minneapolis apartment.
It's about identifying gaps or failures in process. And the fact that we have a police department that's unwilling to participate in that exercise is extremely troubling and a direct violation of the city charter.
Council President and Committee Chair Elliott Payne says a lack of accountability and transparency goes beyond MPD, reaching top city leadership. But in a statement, a city spokesperson writing on behalf of the chief and commissioner says the city wants a full and fair audit, adding that, quote, it's unfortunate that the concerns have been escalated through the public presentation when this situation could have been avoided.
And so it is incredibly frustrating that we are not getting participation from MPD.
Timmerman says it's the second consecutive meeting MPD has missed, adding his team is also navigating attempts by the union representing officers to question and undermine his office's authority. As he was attempting to interview an MPD employee, Timmerman says the employee asked if they would be subjected to discipline if the auditor believes their answer is incomplete or untruthful.
This question itself was incredibly concerning to me, an officer asking if I can be untruthful with the Office of City Auditor.
Raya Katene reporting there. We're taking you live from the nation's capital on day 22 of the government shutdown. It's now the second longest in U.S. history. And as we enter week 4 of this shutdown, there's still no end in sight. That means many Minnesotans may have a much harder time putting food on the table. Minnesota state officials say SNAP and food benefits will not be issued in November. That is until the government shutdown ends. 2 more impacts of the shutdown you might notice. First, at food shelves. Standing in this long line are federal workers. More than 1 million of them around the nation are either furloughed or working without pay. Here's another possible impact. Last night, a shortage of air traffic controllers impacted thousands of flights across the country. The direct cause of this isn't immediately clear, but the Transportation Secretary has said some workers are taking unscheduled time off to protest not being paid.
It's the perfect storm of ugly. That's what the American people are in the middle of while Donald Trump refuses to negotiate and gets on his plane and flies away.
The radical left Democrats are holding the entire federal government hostage to appease the extremists in their party. And they are extreme. I mean, I've never seen anything like it.
Democrats say they want to meet with the president, asking him to get involved and end the shutdown. Their timeline is to have that face-to-face meeting before he leaves in a few days for Asia. But President Trump says he'll only meet with the Democrats if they reopen the government. A look from the White House today, where President Trump is meeting with the NATO Secretary General. The two have a lot to discuss, including how to move forward with the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. That's after intense Russian strikes overnight across Ukraine that damaged several buildings and cut power to several cities. Right now, crews are working to restore that power as temperatures are dropping heading into winter. Meantime, today, the Kremlin says the planned summit between President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin is still being planned. But Trump said a second meeting between he and Putin was on hold because, quote, he didn't want it to be a waste of time. NBC's Kare Simmons is in Moscow with the latest.
Hey there, good day to you. The Kremlin today insisting that preparations continue for a summit between President Trump and President Putin, but the Russian government at the same time saying its demands must be met before there is peace in Ukraine. That comes after a difficult phone call between Foreign Minister Lavrov and Secretary of State Rubio. That phone call was designed to try to make preparations for that summit, but appears to have descended into an argument over what the outcome should be, with the Russian government saying that it would not be prepared to simply freeze the front line in Ukraine, and that other agreements should be made, including that Ukraine should end up as a neutral country, perhaps even with a limited army. The Europeans and Ukrainians are unlikely to agree to that, arguing that Russia would be open to be able to attack again. European leaders issuing a statement saying that they support President Trump's view that the fighting should end immediately. So far, we have not heard directly from President Putin himself. Inside the Kremlin there, behind me, President Putin will be figuring out his next move and whether a meeting between him and President Trump will actually be practical and will make progress.
Kare Simmons, thank you. A major step toward accountability this week. Two top Evergreen recovery executives are now admitting to fraudulently billing millions of dollars to Medicaid while claiming to help people battling addiction. Investigative reporter A.J. Legault is at federal court with the latest developments in his multi-year investigation called Recovery, Inc.
Evergreen Recovery's former CEO, Chantal Magadans, walked into federal court for a date nearly 2 years in the making.
Hi, Chantal. Can I ask you some questions? Can you tell me why you decided to plead guilty?
She did not respond to questions, but in front of the judge admitted what Kare Levin's investigation into Evergreen exposed was true, that Evergreen was exploiting both clients and taxpayers, billing for treatment clients like Kumari Robinson did not always receive.
I was not in group all of those days.
What would you call this then?
Falsified records.
In her plea deal, Magadans detailed how, in advance of a DHS visit, she helped Evergreen's owner, Sean Grigo, hold an all-night session to create falsified documentation to justify funds Evergreen had fraudulently received from the government. Kare's investigation previously exposed Evergreen documenting a man was in treatment at the very moment he was across town committing a double murder. Meanwhile, Grigo and her husband, David Backus, lived a lavish lifestyle of high-dollar cars, private jets, and spent millions of dollars on luxury clothes and purses. Backus, who has not been charged, and Grigo, who pled not guilty, have previously, in no uncertain terms, denied committing fraud.
We didn't steal millions of dollars, girl. Read the state statute. Have a good f***ing life.
Everything you've said is false. Everything you said is slander, and will be availed in the court, I promise you that.
Today in court, Evergreen's former CFO, Heather Heim, unveiled that she was also guilty of conspiracy to commit wire fraud.
Heather, Kare 11, do you have any comment?
Both of the former Evergreen managers told the court they committed the fraud at Sean Grigo's direction.
Sentencing dates have not been set, but federal guidelines call for both former Evergreen execs to spend between 21 and 27 months in prison. At federal court for Kare 11 Investigates, Recovery Inc., I'm AJ Legault.
Some retail cannabis stores are looking forward to a deal between the state and the Prairie Island Indian community to get more cannabis supply on the shelves. It is the third agreement between the state and tribal nations here in Minnesota. That supply of cannabis is a big deal to licensed micro businesses like Mark Ides. He received his retail cannabis license in August, but has had no product to sell to customers, now hoping this new compact leads to supply for his business.
As more and more compacts get signed and more you get less scarcity in the marketplace, the more excited we are to open up this market and be a part of the community.
Ide says customers have voiced their frustration with the lack of supply. He says after he got his license, calls and foot traffic spiked by nearly 200%, but actual sales dropped by close to 80%, with some customers frustrated that they didn't have cannabis to sell. Stick with us. We got more news and weather coming up after the break.